images of the R.M. Palmer Candy Company going up in flames. The blast killing 2 people and leaving 9 missing. This happened yesterday afternoon in the town of West Reading. Fire crews are reporting at least 8 people are in the hospital. The extent of their injuries still unknown this morning. Also not known exactly what caused the explosion, but employees in the factory reported a fire minutes before.
Black labor in the South contributed to an enormous amount of wealth for these plantation owners. Black slavery built southern railroads, ports, but not a lot of white people owned slaves in the South, and it was abolished in the North in like 1804.
You guys staying here? Are you planning to stay?
And worse yet, the couple caught him moving in with U-Haul trucks on the same day that they bought it. Judge, what can you do besides arson? You slap the man in the face, and you do it immediately, because if you wait too long, then the politician feels like he can keep doing this. Everybody built America. And when you say who built something, well, who designed it? Who was the architect? Who financed it? Labor's just a part of it. So if we're going to have a conversation about reparations, which I'm open to since I'm 1% black.
Yeah, that's true.
And I might get a check. You have to talk about it accurately.
As I love to point out, I love to get my right-wing populism from a guy saying that slave masters don't get enough credit. There's no subjugation brutal enough that Fox won't tell you the person with the boot on your neck deserves to be applauded.
And you know it's bad because even Gutfeld is like, I don't know what my guy's doing right now. When Gutfeld checks out, he's like, you're a one man, buddy. That's when you know that you've gone way too far.
She can't believe that it just gone from a normal, friendly interaction to this guy's putting his hands in places that I can't believe it's happening. So I would suggest that women, and I've gotten in trouble for saying this before, you slap the man in the face. And you do it immediately. Because if you wait too long, then the politician feels like he can keep doing this. And it doesn't matter if it comes out a year or 3 years later. Do it immediately when he's fresh.
It's terrible advice. That's the easy response. It's not the woman's duty to fight the person off. And if she doesn't do that, then he'll think it's okay. That's what Jesse Waters said. That's just another form of, it's your fault because you didn't fight back in the particular way that I, after the fact, say that you have to.
What you do is you get a guy. Everybody has a guy. You get a tough guy. First you get a guy, and you pay the guy some cash. The guy walks up in the middle of the night. He lights the house on fire. Hold on a second. Let me finish.
We're not letting you finish.
This is an analogy that will not
Arson
fly.
is the move because then you collect the insurance from the fire, and then the woman, the squatter, gets blamed for the fire.
Do not listen to this at home.
She's dead.
He wasn't even doing the thing where he pretends to laugh a little bit. He pretends it's a joke. He just said it, straight face. He's now returned to this point multiple times. So if a viewer experiences a squatter and sets it on fire, I guess Jesse Waters is fine.
It's so creepy too, the ease with which he said those things. It's like he's thought about it. That's what I think when I see him say these things. Like, listen, everybody's got a guy. First of all, what the hell? No, I don't have a guy.
Oh, you don't have the murder guy? You don't have the murderer?
I want to talk to you about a U.S. patent that I received several years ago in the field of electromagnetism, specifically a magnetically coupled rotor system. Magnets are a form of stored energy like batteries and attract with north and south. You can actually push things around with this field. As you push one, it pushes the other, and it has sort of a rubbery effect. So I began to think about this when I got a hold of a bunch of magnets, and I started to think about how a motor system works. And this is a kind of an electric drill, and it's the rotating armature that goes around an arc segment magnet like this. And this electricity makes this rotor spin. So this is a armature that is a rotor. In brushless systems, the magnets can actually spin around the armature as you change the polarities in these electromagnetic systems, so you can push the magnets around instead of the armature. I came up with this idea that in a brushless system, if you can move the magnets around, there's no such thing as a singularly poled magnet. So the magnets that are spinning both, have a field that is driven by the concave structure. The outer part of the magnet is just basically the housing, and it just spins. So what I thought of is, well, why not couple that exterior magnetic field outside of the curve of the motor magnet? I started to think about, how to do this, and eventually I went to a company called Stanford Magnetics, and they make neodymium magnets. And I said, well, can you make a specific shape of magnet for me? And so I ended up making a shape of magnet that's like a convex lens. It has an arc segment on the inside, and it's flat on the outside. Now, one of the reasons I did this was through empirical understanding of what I was about to try and do, which was couple the rotation of a magnet to other magnets and have kinetic energy transferred in a sort of a virtual gear. It takes 6 of these arc segment magnets to create the circle that would go around an armature in the middle. And I had these magnets made so that they're what's called axial polarized. The magnetic field is coming through the magnets in this direction. And so as you go around an array that I made, you go from south to north, just like you would in a standard electric motor. So with really precise machining, I had the magnets made, and I had these rotors made in the form of a a set of rotors would have a bearing at the bottom, which you can't see, and a shaft. And these are the magnets, and the inside is curved. So what happens in the north-south and north-south orientation, if I spin one, I have them all spin. Now, why and how could this be useful? Well, there are several things that this patent covers and some that have not been patented, and I'll discuss some of those things right now on this video.
Every single American.
I thank the gentleman for his answers.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
Seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter dated January 12, 2021 by Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry, where he decries all political violence and calls for an end to that and asks for respect for all political viewpoints.
Without objection.
Another thing we can't examine because he's not here. Very
No,
good.
you can
Thank
examine it. It's a document. He's going to
No, examine him for what he wrote and the intent behind what he said.
Well, I would
But,
just,
okay.
I would just point out that that's unanimous consents are for documents, and we got the document right here that he handed to you.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous
Chair
consent.
now recognizes Ms.
Mr.
Wasserman.
Chairman,
for her 5
I have a
minutes.
unanimous consent request, Mr. Chairman.
Pardon?
I have a unanimous.
Okay, gentleman is recognized for unanimous consent.
What if, for World War III, I can promise French a 4-day war week?
You have adopted about France, but I have also adopted about the US. You know, what is required from us is not to invade other countries, like you did.
I'm afraid, as far as I'm concerned, the US were the biggest destabilizing influence.
We know that America was built on genocide, slavery, and colonialism.
That's the point of America First, is not everybody can be first, it's us.
Well, but that's a bit contradictory with your plan of being the captain of the team, because when you're a captain of the team, you don't say America First. What you say is you stand with some principles that can unite your team. So the problem with your America First
I'm gonna stop you right there.
America First is America alone.
What? I was reeling. These withering ad hominem attacks, really, on America had me seeking comfort and reassurance, the kind I could only get from another member of the media. Famed French journalist, Leah Salamé.
Friends with the US. But sometimes it's hard to follow you, you know? Sometimes, how to tell you that? I mean, sometimes we don't trust you. And we have reasons for that, isn't it? You know, I'm French, but I was born in Lebanon. I have special.
Or in Lebanon?
Yeah, I was born in Lebanon. Okay. So I know how you Americans acted in the Middle East, how you acted in Iraq, how you acted in Afghanistan.
That was
come
an
on.
anomaly. That's the exception to the.
No, it's the
rule.
exception. It's history. You came there and then you withdrew in 24 hours and you left the country for the Taliban. And you know Afghanistan and Iraq. It's our borders, man.
No,
it's our borders.
No,
so we have to deal with millions of refugees coming when you withdraw. So we have memory of you also. So of course we're friends with you, but we have memory.
I don't know if you know this. We were spreading democracy as a beacon of freedom in the world. So I just want to make clear that, you know, sometimes when you spread democracy, it's like a buffet. Are there crumbs on the floor? Yes. Sometimes things fall. But we've laid out a beautiful meal for the world.
Yeah. What are the latest successes?
Dine on the latest successes. Well, you know what's interesting? It's funny that you bring that up. Let's say we didn't do the Middle East necessarily perfectly, and let's say we destabilized many countries and killed tens of thousands of people, and drove millions of refugees that destabilized other Western countries. Let's say all of that is true.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't have a follow-up to that. I was just saying, that's all.
So let's be honest.
We're not going to pay a CEO salary for a person who can flip a hamburger. I was raised in a single wide trailer, raised very poor. My dad taught us to work. I started a business with nothing. There is nobody that's a victim here unless you want to stay a victim.
Today, a cashier at Walmart in Nashville would have to work more than 823 years to earn what the company's CEO, Doug McMillon, was paid last year. You know, we constantly tell people to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but we constantly are changing the materials from which these bootstraps are being made, or giving people no bootstraps at all. It is an unequal system. And while there are a few examples of successes, overall, systemically, we see that across race, across geography, people in Tennessee are struggling and are stagnant, and the pandemic exacerbated these issues for our constituents. And when a big corporation has a huge disparity in pay between workers and the CEO, it's Tennessee taxpayers who pay for health and food assistance for their workers. We are subsidizing some of the largest corporations and most profitable corporations in the history of our nation, and it would be completely unnecessary if these companies respected their workers and paid a dignified wage. This bill is to look at the system of income inequality that Tennesseans are subsidizing by our taxpayers having to subsidize these corporations and pay for SNAP and TennCare benefits because of the shortcomings of these corporations. According to a national survey, more than 52% of Republicans and 66% of Democrats are concerned with the excessive income inequality between CEOs and workers. And so this is a bill that is not about left or right. It's a moral issue of right and wrong. We should no longer subsidize these businesses, these models of business that create obscene amounts of wealth for a few at the top, while our working class constituents in my district and your district are suffering. Do you believe that those folks are locked in those jobs for the entirety of their lives? Sponsor recognized. Thank you. What I know is that these are the workers who are on the front lines and who brought us through the pandemic, and their wages remain stagnant while these CEOs got bonuses and increased salary rates. That's what I know, is that we have a system that keeps people locked into cycles of poverty. And so people, we don't, the American dream that my grandparents talked about was that you could go up, but we see our system now, there are all these barriers and blockades from helping people advance their lives to live lives of dignity. And we see this massive income inequality that did not exist when many of these members on the committee were my age. We did not see this massive, obscene amount of wealth inequality. This is a rather new phenomenon we're seeing in our country, and so people are stuck and trapped. These are my constituents, your constituents in Knoxville as well, who are suffering in these low-wage poverty jobs. I'm working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet. I'm working 2 jobs for full-time jobs for part-time wages. It is immoral. And I think this is something that we can agree across the political spectrum. We don't want to see our constituents stuck in these stagnant positions, but that they should be able to advance themselves. And keeping people these poverty wages where they have to rely on government assistance programs does not do that.
I had a hard time following that answer. Do you think that folks, it's very simple, do you think that the folks in these cashier positions are stuck there for a lifetime?
Many of them are, yes, Mr. Lafferty, Representative Lafferty. Many people are trapped in these low-wage poverty jobs. And because they have to choose between paying for their groceries or paying for their prescriptions, they are trapped in these jobs with these poverty wages. And as Dr. King said, we have a system that has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. And that's what we're dealing with.
Why, in your view, is it appropriate for the Tennessee General Assembly to decide that it knows better than the officers and directors of the corporation what salary a CEO or any other employee of a company ought to be paid?
I think if the state was not subsidizing the social service safety nets, if we weren't subsidizing TennCare and SNAP, then we shouldn't have a say. But it is the state taxpayers who are paying for the shortcomings of these corporations. It is our taxpayers who are paying for their workers to have health care and to have food benefits and many other social safety net programs because the corporations are paying poverty wages. So we are already brought into this whether we like it or not. As I cited, I won't cite a statistic again, but millions of people who are working for these corporations rely on benefits from the government. So we are already involved. And these are people who work at Walmart, Tyson, FedEx, who we're paying for their benefits because the corporation is not paying dignified wages to their workers.
When you say these people are stuck in these low-end jobs, I'm wondering who you think has them stuck. Because one of the great things about America in my adult life is that I've been in all kinds of tax brackets in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s. I've been all over the map. I've never been stuck.
I'm saying that these corporations have them stuck. If we look at economic mobility, when some of my friends like Representative Carr were my age, we had greater Representative Reagan, when you were my age, there's greater economic mobility amongst people could buy a house, they could have children in a family. But now we see such economic stagnation recently where we have increasing wealth inequality that did not exist back when some of my colleagues here were my age. And so what we look at is this economic stagnation. And I think this is something, again, that transcends partisan divides, but it's something that we have to really have a serious conversation about, is why are people my age not able to purchase a house? Why are they stuck working at Walmart and then when they get off work, going to work at 7-Eleven, to working these full-time jobs for part-time wages just to feed their children, just to make sure that their children have the tools they need to go to school? I mean, these are real stories that I've heard on the campaign trail, talking to people, knocking doors. People are stuck. And we look at the price of housing going up, we look at the price of the cost of living going up, and we don't see wages rising for anybody except the corporate CEOs. And I want to say, too, is that these CEOs don't live in Tennessee. The people who work for these businesses do. The people who work at Walmart live in our district. The people who work at FedEx live in our district. These CEOs are out living on the Cayman Islands. They're living their best life. And our constituents are suffering and paying the consequences. And so I ask my colleagues here, let's stand with our constituents, not these multinational corporations. This bill does not apply to small mom and pop businesses, but it applies to these big mega corporations, multinational corporations who could care less about Tennessee taxpayers and Tennesseans as a whole.
Point of correction, sir. Fred Smith, the CEO of FedEx, in fact, lives in Memphis. I visited his home.
Thank you. One example out of millions, but I was referencing if we want to look at McDonald's, if we want to look at Walmart, if we want to look at Tyson Food, but if you want to find one example of a CEO who lives here, props to you, Chairman Reagan.
I feel really concerned because this is basically inspiring and creating what is known as class warfare.
I'm not inspiring class warfare. What I'm inspiring is a system that treats all members of our beloved community with dignity. But if we look at what Jesus was challenging, if we look at the Greek, when he said blessed are the poor, he used the word patopos, which means those who have been made systemically poor. And that is what I'm challenging. This to me is a moral obligation for us to care for those who Jesus called the least of these. And so I'm not inspiring any type of warfare or violence. What I'm inspiring is a system that treats people with dignity and equality when it comes to those who are actually advancing our society, and it's working class people.
Because FedEx was referenced, it was just a couple of years ago, the single largest tax break in our budget was $21 million for FedEx. And I think it was the very next year we gave them a massive tax cut in jet fuel. And the reality is, since 2017, we've given FedEx 3 big tax cuts in jet fuel, and we have raised prices at the pumps for Tennesseans 3 times. I think it's important to note that when you're talking about that equality, those folks at the top are seeing massive tax breaks, but the citizens in our state are not.
What would be the impact on Tennessee, say, if FedEx decided to move out of state? These companies have the opportunity to go anywhere they want to.
I don't foresee any of these companies completely abandoning Tennessee simply by a 0.1 tax increase to subsidize. The second part of your question, you said that I stated that the workers subsidize these corporations. That is incorrect. I stated that the government subsidizes these corporations by paying for their SNAP and TennCare benefits because the company is paying them starvation wages.
Another fire hits Russian cities. This one is in St. Petersburg. Ukrainian artillery destroys a hut on the outskirts of Bakhmut, in which the mercenaries of PMC Wagner lived. Ukrainian military aviation is already using JDAM bombs against the occupiers, says the Speaker of the Ukrainian Air Force. Soldiers from the 53rd Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces destroyed the accumulation of military equipment of the occupiers. And Belarusian dictator Lukashenko is saying now, Poland is preparing to invade Belarus.
Они готовятся вторгнуться на территорию Беларуси для уничтожения нашей страны.
Announced her 17-year-old son, Tyler, and his girlfriend are expecting a child.
We're very excited and wanted to move forward and welcome this life into the world.
Was there any part of that challenged any of your beliefs before you did that sit down with them and just realizing?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I'm a Christian and, there are standards that we like to uphold, but none of us do it perfectly.
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard O'Jet here. And in the latest version of Do As I Say, Not As I Do, Lauren Boebert, the Colorado horny toad, talked about becoming a grandmother at 36. We do know that the police have been called to the Boebert's household numerous times. The complaints are numerous on her loud and rowdy family. It was even alleged that she killed her neighbor's dog. So when that sawed-off little Jacqueline starts quoting the Bible, it's all for show. Just listen to her delusional logic. Obviously, I'm a Christian, she said, and there are standards that we like to uphold, but none of us do it perfectly, and that's the extent of her reasoning in not drowning her ill-prepared son. She said that because of the pregnancy, her son had given up dreams of attending Universal Technical Institute in Florida. Instead, he plans to take courses at the community college. Boebert, a high school dropout, is trying to sell the idea that her genius kid will have to settle for being a loser and pay child support for 18 years. Lauren has been quick to use Bible verses to go after Joe Biden, though, and was recently seen on television praying in the rotunda like a half-baked Benny Hinn. Lauren Boebert is as fake as a $3 bill. Her twisted version of Christianity is nauseating. Boebert's version of Jesus in a MAGA hat holding an AR-15 is disgusting and a perversion of the scriptures. Lauren Boebert makes a mockery of her own religion by excusing herself and her family of the rules that she wants you and your kids to follow. She is a classic Christian waffle, and that's a fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.
How do you do it? You take if you got a pile of crap and you chop it up 34 times, it's still a pile of crap. It's duplicitous charging.
I think by duplicitous, he means duplicitous or duplicative. It's very unclear what he's talking about, but he is ulterior.
A pile of crap. It's duplicitous charging. They're trying to smear the guy. They're trying to take cases that nobody else would take and resurrect them. This is literally legal voodoo.
My heart is broken.
I'm holding my head down in shame.
I had some tears in my eyes early.
I feel bad for the guy. This is what it seems to be. It's a political purge.
This is burning down the rule of law.
This is going to destroy America.
This is like communist level shit.
This is exactly like what happened during the fall of the Roman Republic.
It's like Stalin's purges. This is literally legal voodoo.
The Bill of Rights is gone.
They have declared, quote unquote, the Roman Civil War.
You can't trust Democrat prosecutors anymore if you're a fair citizen of the United States of this country.
They are after Donald Trump because they're really after you.
They have spent probably trillions putting you in your place. We must make them pay a price.
They've wanted violence from the right from the beginning.
This is the season of them staging terror attacks and blaming on Trump supporters.
I mean, we're in a police state. I'm not even arguing this. They're still not doing anything with Hunter.
Think of the Hunter Biden laptop.
33,000 deleted emails. This is too great an assault on our system, much greater than anything we saw on January 6th.
They will regret doing this.
What you're seeing now is lawlessness, and the question is who can stop it.
And people better be careful. And that's all I'll say about that.
Probably not the best time to give it your AR-15. And I think most people know that.
DonaldJTrump.com. Go tonight. Give the president some money.
We're going to fight for Donald Trump, and we're just rallying behind the man today with ham sandwiches.
I'm Kimberly. I am an activist and organizer. I remember the very first day I went out to protest on June 2nd, 2020. I was supposed to go out on June 1st, but I turned on my TV and I got a little scared, I have to admit. I'm not scared anymore though. But on that day I was. I remember seeing a police officer who I now know was a member of the SRG, violently push a woman who looked like she couldn't have been more than 100 pounds to the floor, sent her body flying and fractured her skull. I said to myself, if they're doing that to white women, I don't know what they're gonna do to me. And I took a breather and I waited and I went out the second day. And in that time of leading, I've led hundreds of thousands of protesters through the streets of New York City, preaching abolition, preaching against police violence. And in those 3 years of doing that, of leading those marches, of leading Black Lives Matter marches, abolish ICE marches, reproductive justice marches, I can't tell you how much violence I've seen. And the violence I've seen has not been at the hands of the people. The violence I've seen has been state-sanctioned violence from members of the NYPD, from members of the SRG. To sit before the people and say that you can't do anything about this is completely unacceptable. We are not asking you to do something about this. What we are doing is we are demanding, we are commanding you to do something about this. You work for us. We are commanding and demanding that you disband the SRG. We will no longer fund our own oppression. We will not fund our own oppression. We will not pay you to exact violence upon our communities. Remove those hundreds of millions of dollars from the SRG and put it into our schools. Fund our schools, fund our children. I live in Harlem, and I'm telling you, we are living in the middle of a crack epidemic nightmare. People need help.
The only comparable violence that I've ever seen to the SRG was what happened at January 6th storming of the Capitol.
And I'm sure that there's a few officers who might have been there as well. I remember returning to New York City, and the SRG had arrested Black Lives Matter protesters outside Trump Towers, meaning that, yes, more New Yorkers were arrested by the SRG on January 6, 2021 than people who stormed the Capitol.
Joe Biden, American patriots are being arrested and held in captivity like animals. Look at what's happening in Washington. And I will tell you, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the expert. She's been to that prison many times. There is nobody that has described what's happening in that prison. It's a hellhole.
Reports from families and attorneys, they have told us that over the past week, the January 6th defendants have had to spend their time scrubbing and cleaning and painting the walls in the area that they have to stay in, the area that they're forced to be housed.
People who had their not even been able to bond hearing yet. We're now 25 months later. This is a violation of constitutional rights, constitutional principles. Look, people can have disagreements about what happened on January 6th. People can want to see the justice system actually work.
These people are in single cells. Have y'all ever watched any movie, right? When people go to jail, what happens? They're in what we call general population, right? Like there's a group of people. They have their own cells. They have access to laptops and tablets. I mean, it's unlike anything that I've ever seen. And like I said, coming out of Texas, I have seen so much worse. They even have, it's two kind of separate facilities. The facility the January 6ers are in, that is the newest facility that they have. That facility was built in the 90s.
The things that are offered. And anyone who's ever had a loved one that's been incarcerated, they understand that this is not the norm. I mean, I don't know what world Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and the rest of them are living in, but even in the women's area, I've got my notes that I was reviewing. Art therapy, yoga, acupuncture. I mean, these are things that we can't even find like in my district for my people, like that aren't incarcerated, right? They have these tablets that they have access to. They're able to get on these tablets. I asked to see the tablets. I saw the tablets. There's two different types of tablets where they're given access to education. I mean, they went out of their way today to make sure that they provided us with a folder full of all the things that they are offering these January 6 inmates as well as others. They've got a barber shop. There's all kinds of stuff that I've never seen. And I've been practicing law for almost 2 decades.
Mr. DeGaro, could you read this headline for the room?
California's EDD unemployment system disaster, predictable fiasco.
Thank you. Can you read that for me, Mr. Smith?
It says the North Carolina Unemployment Agency is a broken system.
A broken system. North Carolina Unemployment Agency, a broken system.
The unemployment insurance system needs to be fixed.
I could not agree more. So let's talk about that and how we can fix it. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support getting Americans the help that they need. More than 1 in 5 911 calls involve mental health or substance use crises. That amounts to millions of calls per year. To keep these Americans safe, we need to connect them to health care. 1 in 4 fatal law enforcement encounters ends the life of someone with mental illness. We cannot improve public safety without giving our communities a better response system for mental health crises. Workers are losing out on nearly $300 billion in wages every year. Companies stop incentivizing workers to stay because they don't need to. They're stuck. Non-competes also drag down the entire economy, hurting even those of us who aren't covered by them. Everyone is harmed when wages are suppressed, innovation is stifled, and competition is prevented. I'm thrilled that the Federal Trade Commission is ending this toxic practice. Banning non-competes will promote the ideals our country was founded on: open markets, economic mobility, and the right to control one's own life. What these headlines show, of course, is that, as you said, state unemployment agencies have long had problems getting help to people who need it and preventing our tax dollars from ending up in the wrong hands. When the pandemic first began, we needed to deliver relief quickly. But due to chronic underinvestment in technology and systems at states that administer programs, we saw the same problems with waste, fraud, and abuse that we've seen for decades under Democratic and Republican presidents in blue states and red states. It is our duty to protect the safety and well-being of everyone who calls our country home. And fulfilling that duty starts with understanding the people that we represent, especially and including members of the LGBTQI+ community. I rise to address how our government can address the issues facing our AAPI community. Supporting Asian and Pacific Island Americans requires recognizing the diversity within those communities. Inadequate data limit our ability to serve all Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Federal data on AAPI people fail to capture differences across ethnic backgrounds. Grouping all AAPI people into one super category erases important distinctions in cultural traditions and lived experiences. In California, anti-AAPI hate crimes are up 177%. But some communities experience these threats more acutely. I'm leading efforts to fund community-based solutions to anti-AAPI hate crimes. But making these tools even more effective requires data that identify at-risk groups. Official data must guide our efforts to keep our AAPI neighbors safe. My question is, why don't we fix this?
Well, I think it requires some leadership on the part of the Congress and the Labor Department. You know, like a lot of these programs that where the federal government's relying on the state and local governments, they give them a lot of discretion. And when times are good, unemployment's low, they don't get a lot of attention until these problems come up.
So here's how I think about this. When someone has a dollar and they lose a dime of it, they think, shucks. But when someone has $100 and they lose $10, they're like a little angry. and it just keeps going up, and now we're in the billions and trillions. So I would love to have your continued pressure on the Department of Labor to use all of the funding that Congress provided in the American Rescue Plan to actually modernize UI, because I'm trying to add up where that $2 billion from the American Rescue Plan has gone, and it does not seem to have all been deployed and spent to improve these programs. States across the country are criminalizing health care for trans youth and revoking individual liberties for gay, lesbian, and bisexual Americans. Congress has the power to correct these injustices, but for too long, we have been part of the problem. By ignoring the need for high-quality, reliable data on LGBTQI+ communities, we've been unprepared to deliver solutions for all Americans. Information is power, and reliable, high-quality data can help care providers identify and close health inequities for the LGBTQI+ community. It can help provide better support in schools for kids who are LGBTQI+, who experience mental health problems at much higher rates than their peers. And it can help us improve our immigration system as we process claims for asylum by those fleeing discrimination in their home countries. LGBTQI+ individuals are among the most vulnerable migrants and refugees at our borders. They have legal rights to asylum and legal rights to humane treatment.
Graham, who supports this and is here now. You got to be kidding me, Senator. Did you read this?
Yeah, I don't think I support the Restrict Act.
You don't support this because you were named as one of the supporters, because this is garbage.
Is this the one with John? There's two bills out there. One allows a review of businesses that are connected to China, give the Secretary the ability to protect our data. Is that the Restrict Act?
We got S686 right here, March 7th. And we got a bunch of Republicans supporting it, because this thing is crazy town. You don't want the government looking into your private phone.
No, I don't.
If they have a hunch you're colluding with the Russians, we remember how that turned out.
Right. Yeah, no, well, the Constitution trumps a statute. So let me come back and, give you a better explanation.
Is there any question? I'll yield to anyone on this committee who disagrees that murder in schools is not murder. I yield.
Will you yield?
Oh, I'll yield. Yes, please.
Yeah, when I was in 11th grade and Joe Biden made our schools gun-free school zones.
Yeah, when I was in 11th grade and Joe Biden made our schools gun-free school zones.
One of the students in my school brought 3 guns to school, and our entire school went on lockdown because he was the only person with a gun. There was no good guy with a gun to protect us kids at school. You want to know why the shooter is dead in Nashville, the trans shooter? You want to know why? Because a good guy with a gun killed that woman. She identified as a man. She was mentally ill, probably taking hormones, and she went in and murdered children and adults in this Christian school in Nashville. So if you want to have a good talk about schools and protecting children, we need to talk about protecting our children the same way we protect our president, we protect our celebrities, we protect this building. Okay, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there are 6 people that are dead in that school, including 3 children, because you guys got rid of the assault weapons ban. Because you guys made it easy for people who don't deserve to have weapons, who are mentally incapable of having weapons of war, being able to buy those weapons and go into schools. I voted for SROs in my schools in Florida after Parkland. We have SROs on every school. Did the good guys with the guns stop 6 people from getting murdered? No. But you know what? AR-15s, you know what those bullets do to children? You know why you don't hunt with an AR-15 with a deer? Because there's nothing left. And there's nothing left of these kids when people go into school and murder them while they're trying to read. You guys are worried about banning books. Dead kids can't read.
Everything about Clarence Thomas's presence on the Supreme Court of the United States would shock the founders and offend many of them. It was inconceivable to them, of course, that the descendants of slaves could ever be members of the United States Supreme Court, but they would almost be equally shocked by the fact that Clarence Thomas has a wife who has a job. And that job is a serious ethical problem for the Supreme Court of the United States. Most members of the court know that, but they have been unable to do anything about it. Virginia Thomas is self-employed in a business that she created. We have no idea how much money she makes in that business, and we have no idea who pays her. In a marriage, money paid to a spouse is, in effect, money paid to both members of that marriage, especially if they both sign the same joint tax return. And so, in very real terms, we don't really know who's paying Clarence Thomas. That's the economic reality of the Thomas marriage, which takes in an unknown amount of money every year from unknown sources in an arrangement never envisioned by the Founding Fathers, and therefore remains beyond the system of so-called checks and balances that the Founders thought they were creating.